coaching at its finest. It's just there it is. See. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Chris Dixon. I'm the head track and field coach at Augsburg University. I have had I would like to say, very unique path into coaching. I started in college athletics in 2019. My position is made possible because of NCAA grant, the NCAA Ethnic Minorities and Women's Grant that Augsburg was awarded in 2019, and so I'm actually paid by the NCAA to work at Augsburg, if that makes sense. So that grant is for ethnic minorities and women to get them into athletic administrative positions, and so great opportunity for me. I am a long-time track and field person. I started my high school career at Apple Valley. Shout out, there it is. At Apple Valley High School in 1996. I had a great coach by the name of Bud Bjorna, who basically recruited me to run track and field in high school. And track coaches are really, really good at being inclusive, which is where I'm going. I was a football and basketball player and wasn't doing anything in the spring, and this guy comes up to me, he's like, "You should run track." And I was like, "Track? Like what?" And so I started getting into track back then, and then I became a decent enough triple jumper and long jumper where I eventually earned a scholarship to the University of Minnesota, where I ran track for the Gophers from 1999 to 2004. My coach, I went to the University of Minnesota, I had a couple of different options, and I went to the University of Minnesota because this guy who had recruited me, Phil Lundeen, was probably one of the smartest human beings I had ever met, and he really talked to me about how he could make me a better athlete. And I mean, he's a genius, honestly. He's my mentor to this day. I run into him all the time. Like, guy's just a great guy, but somebody that really fueled my passion in the track and field. And so I became a career personal trainer, ran a couple businesses for a couple years. And then in 2019, I was like, you know what? I kind of want to get into college coaching. And I applied at this position at Augsburg, which was the Director of Athletic Diversity, Inclusion, and Assistant Track and Field Coach. And so my first year, I'm super excited to be at Augsburg. And then, if you remember 2019, COVID hits, right? And so we had my first year as an assistant coach, we had indoor season, and then the next year we had outdoor season. And so in 2 years, I only coached one indoor and one outdoor season. So I say my first 2 years was like 1 year. I had never gone through the whole college coaching season until a couple years later. And so there was a learning curve there for me. And then in 2021, our previous head coach had decided to take another position, and I became the head coach. And to be honest, I turned it down at first because my athletic director, Jeff Swinton, came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to be our next head coach." And you gotta remember, I'd only been here 2 years, and I hadn't even coached a full track season yet. And so it was really odd to have the opportunity to be the head coach. I never saw myself as a head coach, and so I took it on an interim basis, and I said, let's see what coaching the whole track season is like. And I almost died. The collegiate season is very, very, very long. It's like 7-8 months, and I said, I don't know if I'm ready for this. This is insane. But I took it because I saw some things that in my first 2 years as an assistant coach that I thought that we could do better. So I took the job 2022. Yes, full time. I took it full time in 2022. So I'm literally in my second full year of being a head coach outside of my interim year. So this is crazy to me that I'm standing here right now, honestly. It's awesome, but it's crazy because it's 4 years ago, I wasn't even in college athletics and get promoted to an assistant athletic director, head coach, and then here I am. And now I'm speaking at the Minnesota Track and Field Coaches Clinic. So Here we go. Yeah, love this. So what I'm talking about today is building inclusive teams. So, I think that track and field, I'm enamored with this sport. I have a love-hate relationship with it, honestly, to be fair. Um, one, because of the time that we invest as coaches. It's a lot of time. It's fun. It's great. At the same time, just like when I was at practice yesterday, there's little glimpses of hope that I see, and I'm like, God, I'm really doing something here. Like, this is cool. This is really cool. And one of the things as a professional in the diversity, equity, inclusion world, the work that I do there is that I think track and field coaches, more than any sport, are probably the most inclusive coaches. You have to think about why that is. As I said, like, I had my high school coach reach out to any kid that was sitting around after school and come out and say, hey, you should come out for track. Right? I'm sure some of you have done that. Like, you're recruiting in school. And I wasn't thinking about running track. I didn't know anything about track and field. And this guy just wanted me to come out. And then I fell in love with the sport. And, what's different about our sport than other sports, especially team sports, right, is that, like, the unit has to function together. Right? And that's what makes our sport very challenging, is because you have different units moving all over the place all the time. Our sport is set up that way. So the question is how do you build an inclusive team when you've got these sections of people all over the place at any given time, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, is just how to build inclusive teams in track and field. But I think that you all are primed and geared for being some of the most inclusive coaches of any sport that there is. So let's talk about some of the challenges, right? As I was alluding to. So some of the challenges in our sport are what? Event groups. You got your throwers, you got your jumpers, you got your sprinters, right? They're all competing. They're all practicing separately. Distance athletes, they're practicing separately, right? There are times that, like in my team, we hardly ever all get together. Hardly are ever in the same room all at one time, right? And then my distance athletes, who are also cross-country runners in the fall, we have team meetings in the fall with the track team, and the distance athletes aren't even there because they're in cross-country still, right? And so how do you get this group of people who are a track team, but all doing individual doing individual events? How do you get them together and, like, be a team? That's really, really difficult in this sport, right? Competition locations, right? So you see the track there, the high jumps over here, triple jump, long jumps over here, the throws are over there. So there were times where I've been on track teams where I never even saw some of my teammates compete, right? So how do you do that? Personalities. Let's talk about track and field personalities. Yeah, right? Like, there's low-key, there's some different personalities in track and field, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but some have said that your sprinters and jumpers are kind of like divas, right? They think they're pretty important. Your sprinters, me and my assistant coach joke about this all the time, and he's like, well, sprinters, we're divas, and I'm like, yeah, but you all run at the same time. Right? When you're a jumper or a field event person, like, it's only one person competing at a time. Think about the energy that gives you, right? Right? So some strong personalities on the team. Your distance runners, who personally I think are a little strange at times. They like to run a lot, and all right, you got some good personalities in your distance crew. Your throwers, I call them the blue collar folks. I just like to get it done, right? So you got all these different personalities, like, coming together. Right? That can be a challenge on a track and field team. The individualism. Right? This is an individual sport. Right? How I compete doesn't really impact you. And how you compete doesn't really impact me. Right? I can do well and you can do poorly, and I can leave the meet feeling great. So again, how do you build inclusion around that kind of The experience level. You know, you get a lot of, and I'm sure you do, you get a lot of people that come out for track, never ran track before. It's the first time. I'm at the college level and get people all never ran track. And I'm just like, why do you want to run track now? Like, no experience in the sport, in the events that they are wanting to compete in. So that can be a challenge. And then personal bias. Right? Everybody has bias. That's one of the things I want to communicate today. Right? We all have our personalities and lived experiences, and we have bias created around that. And so we have to kind of attend to that, so to speak. Okay? So these are some of the challenges that you're going to face in dealing or building inclusive teams. So there was a Harvard Business Review study that they studied like 3,000 Fortune 500 CEOs, directors, high-level folks. And what they found is that 1 in 3 of these people that they surveyed holds an accurate view of their inclusive leadership capabilities. 1 in 3. So that's, right? The majority, or the minority of us don't really understand how we are impacting people when it comes to inclusion, right? Essentially that we think we're more inclusive leaders than we really are, right? And that's what we have to try to attend to. So, first thing I like to do, especially when I do any diversity, equity, and inclusion workshop, is I like to develop what we call shared meaning, right? To make sure that we're all on the same page about these words that we're going to talk about today. Okay? So I've got a bunch here that we're going to go through individually. But I want to make sure, now, there are thousands of definitions of lots of these words, lots of academic definitions. I'm not going to split hairs, but for the purposes of this workshop today, what I want to make sure is that we're talking about the same thing, right? And what I constantly find out is that when I'm having conversations about equity or inclusion, sometimes people we're using the same word, but we have different definitions of what that is, right? And so what I want to make sure is that for the folks in this room, we're all on the same page of what we're talking about. So we're going to go through some of these, and they're diversity, inclusion, micro inequities, belonging, identity, culture, equality, and equity. So diversity. You've heard this term, right? Diversity, big thing going on in the world, right? The practice of or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social, ethnic backgrounds and of different gender, sexual orientations, etc. Basically what we call the mix. Right? What is the mix of your track and field team? And to be fair, you may have a blend, a different type of mix, right? Like, and I want to say this. One of my pet peeves, right? This is just between us. One of my pet peeves is that when, like at my job, right? Like we'll have a person of color come in and interview for a job, and then they'll say, we had a diverse candidate. What? So I want to say that diverse does not mean people of color. Right? We're talking about the mix of people in the room, on the team. What does your team look like from a diversity perspective? And to be fair, we're not talking about just racial or ethnic diversity. Right? Diversity in this current climate seems to get attached to people of color. And that's problematic for me. Right? That is not the definition of diverse. I'm not diverse because I'm a person of color up here speaking in front of the room. I'm not a diverse speaker. Right? I'm Chris. Right? So we have to be careful about how we use this term diversity, and that's why I wanted to put it on the screen for you. the mix. What's the mix like? Okay? Next, inclusion, which is why we're here. Right? What does inclusion mean? Inclusion is an organizational effort and practice in which different groups of individuals having different backgrounds are culturally and socially accepted and welcome. How the mix works, right? You got these ingredients, and then you start putting them together. How do they all blend together? Right? How does that mix work? Right? Micro inequities. Raise your hand if you've heard of micro inequities before. Okay. A few of you. Okay, good. I teach this workshop at Augsburg. Right? And to be fair, I had never heard of it like 5 years ago. But now I work in DEI, so I know everything DEI. Right? Micro inequities. Brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults towards people from marginalized communities, also known as microaggressions. Right. And the only reason I put this here is because I would say it's exhausting. If you're dealing with microaggressions or micro inequities on a common or day-to-day basis, it's exhausting. And so there's something to be learned about the language that we use with our teams. Okay? Belonging. Right? I love belonging. The subjective feeling of deep connection with social groups, physical places, and individual and collective experiences is a fundamental human need that predicts numerous mental, physical, social, economic, and behavioral outcomes. I would call that home. Right? When you leave here today, whenever you leave here, I'm sure you've got lots of workshops to attend. Some are fully attended, and this one's sparsely attended. Right? But when you go home, don't you feel like you belong there? That's your place, right? I go back to my apartment, North Minneapolis, where I live, and it's like, this is my place. Yeah, for sure. Right? You feel good when you're at home. You let out a sigh, you're like, I'm at home. That's exactly what I'm going to do when I get home, actually. Right? Does your track team feel like that? Does it feel like home to everybody? Does it feel like people belong there? Do they feel like they belong there? I'm just posing questions here. Okay? Moving on. So we got identity. We're going to do some work on this one today. That's why I gave you those little sheets of paper. Okay? Identity. Identity encompasses the memories, experience, relationships, and values that create one sense of self. This amalgamation creates a steady sense of who is over time, even as new facets are developed and incorporated into one's identity. Basically, who am I? Who are you? Like when you think about your identity, who are you? I'm previewing something for you. This is what they call foreshadowing. Who are you? All right, we're going to do some work on that in a few minutes. Okay? Culture. Probably right now in 2024, my favorite word. Culture. Okay? The patterns of shared basic assumptions, behaviors, and experiences within a group of people that are learned and taught to new members in order to guide them in the appropriate and inappropriate ways of perceiving, thinking, feeling, and acting. This could include language, values, beliefs, traditions, food, music, whatever. Culture. The key out of that is what's learned versus and what's taught. So when you think of your track and field teams, because I believe that the team is a reflection reflection of the coaches. So what's the culture of your team? Quick story, when I took over as head coach a couple years ago, we do these end of season evals, and I'm not gonna lie, I was low-key offended. Had a bunch of athletes, and they specifically said on the eval that the culture of this team is trash. It hurt my feelings. It's a first year head coach. Right? Culture of this team is trash. We had a bunch of people quit. We had a bunch of people that quit that I was really actually happy that they quit. Right? Culture of the team was trash. Kept hearing it. Just trying to recruit people to the team. They're like, I wanted to run track last year, but I heard the team sucked. And they were specifically talking about the culture of the team. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this in the off season. Like, what is the culture of my team? And who's responsible for that? Right? Culture of the team, I believe, again, is a reflection of the coaches and the coaching staff. Right? So another note, right, in that same vein, because now I'm a whole 3-year seasoned head coach, and one of the things that 3 years ago was socially acceptable on our team culture, so you can come into practice anytime you want to. You start practice at 3:45, people show up at 3:50, 4 o'clock, 4:15, just walk in like, oh. And I was like, yeah, no. That's not gonna happen. We gotta change this culture. So, first day of practice last year, implemented a new team rule. Anybody that's late to practice, 50 push-ups off top. Unless you communicate with me beforehand, and obviously there's some exceptions. If you're in class, fine, whatever. But if you don't communicate with me beforehand, if I don't know you're gonna be late to practice, you're coming to practice, you're doing, my assistant coach is gonna count out every one of those 50 push-ups. Now, of course, you can imagine when you have a culture where people historically have been doing whatever they want and showing up whenever they want to, you can imagine this is not a rule that is widely accepted. So of course I had some athletes test me the first week or two. I think they thought I was joking. Show up to practice late, I was like, 50 push-ups, let's go. Excuses. Oh, coach, I was doing this. I had this. Did you text me? Did you tell me you were going to be late? You didn't? Okay, 50 push-ups then. I think it was about a week. People just stopped being late. Interesting. Right? One little simple rule is changing the culture of what people think about how they can show up to practice. And by the way, that was preseason. Now we're in season, it's 100 push-ups. You should see these skinny jumpers trying to do 100 push-ups. It's hilarious. But usually, nobody's late to practice anymore. Right? I sit at the door of our dome. I sit at the door. Like we start practicing. It was 7:30 now. 7:30 a.m. At 7:30 a.m., I'm sitting at the door looking at my watch like, please be late, please be late. I want somebody to do push-ups. And they know. They come running in, they're like sweating, because they don't want to do those push-ups. But all that is trying to change the culture. And I tell my athletes that, like, this is about respect, right? When you're at track practice, you're on my time. Right? After that, you're on your own time, do whatever you want. But we come up here, I'm never late to practice. It's disrespectful to me and the coaching staff who have this whole practice plan ready for you, and you show up late. There's got to be some consequence or penalty for that, right? But again, we're trying to change the culture of what we do. All right, equality. Woo. We're gonna go deep. We're gonna come back to this one too. Equality. As a descriptive concept, equality is, by definition, an objectivable relation between entities that are incidental in some specific respect. Or identical, I'm sorry. Identical in some respect. So we're talking about being the same. Equality is a weird concept, right? Especially when you're talking about humans. Are we treating everybody the same? And is that what we want to do? Do we want to treat everybody the same? In some cases, you might say, yeah, of course we do. We want to treat everybody the same. Okay. Then I encourage you to look at equity. What's equity? It's often used interchangeable with equality. But there's a core difference. Where equality is a system in which each individual is offered the same opportunities regardless of the circumstance, equity distributes resources based on need. We're going to come back to it. Trust me, we'll come back to it. Just keep focused on equity and equality. I would call equity nurturing. What do you need to be successful and to get the outcomes that you're looking for? Right? What do you need? It's more of a question. All right, it's time. It's time for the identity wheel. So here's what I want you to do. You were all given, if you don't have one, I will give you some more. You've got this identity wheel here. Big circle. What I want you to do for the next, let's say 5, 7 minutes, is I want you to think about all of the identities that you hold that are important to you, right? You don't have to share it with anybody. This is for you and you only, right? I want you to think about the identities that you hold that are important to you. Now, here's the rules. I want you to section off the circle proportionally. Okay? So when you make your identities, you could have one identity, you could have 100 identities. It's up to you. But try to section off as a pie chart those identities in proportion to what's important to you. And if you really feel comfortable, put a percentage by it. Right? So if you feel like one particular identity is 25% of your identity, or make it 25% of the pie chart. Right? 25 pie. So for the next couple of minutes, I want you to think about the identities that you hold that are important to you. And start drawing on that chart. And let's come back and see what we get. Okay? I'm a track coach, so I'm going to use a timer. We got 5 minutes. Ready? Go for it. left. Sorry to rush you, I know. I was gonna go with 10 minutes, but I kinda wanted you to be a little pressed for time doing this. All right. Again, I know that was not enough time, purposely. I'm very well aware. That's the whole point, right? Somebody asks you to think about all the identities you hold and draw a graph, and you have 5 minutes to do that. Like, that's not enough time to do that. Okay? So keep working if you want to. I want you to complete that. I'm gonna ask you questions. Anybody wanna share their identity wheel? Just thought I'd ask. I knew nobody was going to, but
I'll share a few, not all of them.
okay, go for it. Yeah.
I'm a mother, I'm an athlete, I'm an educator,
Yeah.
I'm a coach, and I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay. Follow-up question. Do any of those identities, or do a couple of them make up more than 50% of your identity?
Yes. I'm a mother more than I'm anything else.
Alright. Thank you for sharing that. That's what's up.
Mom, wife, grandma, teacher, mentor, coach, friend, coworker.
Yeah.
I forgot one. Owner.
Owner. Okay. Yeah.
And they do like all those. Mom, wife. Oh, sorry. There's a doctor in there.
Forgot the doctor.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Mostly mom.
Mostly mom. That's a huge part of your identity, and I'm hearing that in the back of the room, right? Being a mother. Okay. Anybody else? Ownership? Go ahead.
I feel like I need more than 100% to fill.
For sure.
Because it's like, listen, I've got like 8 things I want to put on here, and I want to give properly. I don't want to be like 0.5% towards this.
Yeah.
But man, does it feel wrong to have such a like husband and a father? That should be like 99.9% of it, and then like link the other things in. And so some of this, it's cool sitting and being like, well, I am the husband and the father that I am in part because of my experiences as a teacher and as a coach, and the reverse, like I am the teacher and the coach that I am because I had kids and went, holy crap, actually, this changes the way I look at things.
Mm-hmm.
So they they overlap quite a bit too, or even like my religion,
Mm-hmm.
my faith. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you don't put that on a pie. That's like the 100% cover that you put over all of it because that's leaking into every single category. So this has been a frustrating experience for me, Chris. Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. No, it is frustrating, right? That's what I said. Somebody asks you to think about all the identities that you hold, and they give you 5 minutes to chart it out. How are you gonna do that, right? You did it in 5 minutes, but I guarantee if I gave you another 5 minutes, you'd be like, oh wait, I forgot this, or I should add this, right? That's the point, right? First time I did this identity wheel, I was like, oh, this is, right? So I'm gonna share mine. And I'm gonna apologize right now. Because you see that right there, and I want to apologize because while I was on the floor doing my identity wheel, my 19-month-old, as I'm sitting on the floor coloring this and having coffee, she just comes over and knocks the coffee over on my identity wheel. So there's a little stain there, right? So I apologize, but as you'll see, one of my roles is, or my identity is father. All right. Now, I want to say something. This is your own, how you view your identity, right? There is no right or wrong to this, right? But I do think it creates some thinking, right? What are the identities I hold? And then that's why I asked you to put them in percentages. And then you're like, should this be more of a percentage or less? Or I don't know. Like, it's a self-reflection, right? And so if you see my identity wheel here, I did this, I think it was last year, 2023. I have, as I identify myself, not about how other people identify me, I identify myself, right? Black, man, father, business leader, educator, athlete, coach. And you see I have it broken down by percentages, right? So that's my identity. That's how I walk around. That's how I get up out of bed every day and I walk into the world and this is what you got. Or this is how I view myself. Not how the world sees me, but how I view myself. Right? And I want to point out the fact that 50% of my identity is being based in being a black man. It's how I walk in the world every day. That's 50, as I view it myself, that's 50% of my identity. And so, when I have interactions or go into spaces, right, that's a large part of my identity. So imagine if I go into spaces or environments where that identity is not represented, or respected, or tolerated, right? Think about how I view those spaces, right? Just my identity with, but it's the same thing. So what I asked you, and the reason I had you do that identity wheel is, you look at your track and field teams, what does inclusion look like for you? You have your own identity wheel, but if every one of your athletes did their identity wheel, what identities do you think they would hold? And how are you working to be inclusive of those identities on your team? I know, we're track coaches, right? So we can't be involved in every aspect of somebody's life, but at the same time, as a coach, what are you doing to make sure people feel welcome and belong, and track and field team feels like home to them based on their identities? Are you having conversations about race and ethnicity, about gender, about sexual orientation, about religion, right? I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying. How can you ensure that the athletes on your team, especially if you have a diverse team, how can you make sure that the athletes on your team feel included on that team in this highly individualized sport that we call track and field? It's really, really hard. And all I'm doing here today is trying to pose questions for you to think about how you can accomplish this. So, Francis Frey and Ann Morris wrote this book called Move Fast. What is it? Move Fast and Fix Things, which is a play off of the Facebook slogan that they have. Facebook has a slogan, and they started the company was Move Fast and Break Things. So they wrote this book, Move Fast and Fix Things. Right? And what they say is inclusion, defined as the act of creating conditions that allow people to thrive, not in spite of their differences, complex, multi-dimensional humans, but precisely because of those differences. I've had to go through some self-reflection myself this year, right? I have some athletes on my team that it was like every day at practice, we at that time we were practicing in the afternoon. And every day at practice, they'd just be gone. They would just literally get up and walk out of practice. It's like 3 or 4. Right? And I started noticing it day after day, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I'm all in my, like, you're not gonna come to my practice and just leave whenever you want to. Alright? Come to find out, they're all Muslim students. And they're all going to pray at sundown. Like, I was like, I almost was at the point where I was going to confront them and just say, hey, I need to talk to you guys. You guys cannot be leaving practice. This is unacceptable. And then I learned, right? It's like, all right, coach, let's bring it down. Okay? I never even thought about it. Never asked. Right? Didn't know anything about the makeup of my team. Had I asked, right, had I known, I'd have had some different feelings about that. But this is what I'm talking about, inclusion. So now, trying to be the inclusive leader I am now, they know when it's time to go pray, just go. You don't have to ask me, you don't have to say anything, just go do what you gotta do. And they always do. And then they come back to practice and jump right back into workout. I think it's cool. Got 4 or 5 Muslim athletes on my team, and they know that Coach Dixon wants them to exercise their religion at any time. That's part of what this track team is about. You get to be you. Precisely because of those differences. I want them to feel like this is home for them. And anything that I can do that will promote that, that's what I'm going to try to do. But I had to go through some learning and had to check myself, so to speak, as a coach to understand where they were coming from. Okay. All right, let's talk about equality and equity. I said I was going to come back to it. So, always a tough conversation as a DEI professional because I know people have differences of opinion. And, think of the 100 meters, right? 100 meter dash. It's a straight race. We all start at the same spot, right? All running 100 meters. Everybody started from the same start line. And this is why I say track and field coaches are probably some of the most inclusive coaches out of any sport. Because you understand, like on a curved race, 200, 400 meters, imagine if we started from the same spot. You line up for the 400 meters and everybody's at the same line. Somebody way smarter than me a long time ago figured out, like, hey, you know what? If I'm out in lane 9, aren't I technically running more than 400 meters? And what you got from that is what? The stagger. Right? So a person in lane 1 starts here, and the person out in lane 9 is going to start way up there. That's equity. Everybody's still running 400 meters. But we acknowledge the fact that we're not all starting from the same spot. And to ensure that you're running the same distance that I'm running, I have to make sure we can move you up over here so that it's at least somewhat fair. Another example, because you all seem like great track coaches. Equality versus equity. Let's say you have a really talented track and field athlete. And then you also have a really not talented. I have a couple on my team. Really not talented. I love them, but they're not great athletes. That not talented athlete comes to you and says, Coach, Can you spend more time with me? I need to work on coming out of the starting blocks. Do you believe in equality? Where you say, hey, you know what? Can't work with you. We have track practice from this time to this time. I only work with athletes. I give everybody the same amount of time. This is what it is. You could do that. I wouldn't fault you. But I would like to believe that probably every one of you in this room is going to be like, you know what? I'm going to spend some more time with you. Right? You need more help to be successful, to achieve the outcomes that you want. That's what we call equity. That's equity-minded. Right? There's nothing wrong with giving somebody something if they need a little bit more to be successful. So here it is. Here's my top 10. I'm gonna be honest. Up until yesterday, I only had 9. Here's my top 10, and I just thought like 9 is such a weird number. Like I gotta round it out. All right. Top 10 tips for inclusion on your track and field teams. 1, self-reflection. It starts with you. That's why I had you do that identity wheel. Every one of us in this room has bias. Whether you acknowledge it or not, you have it. Sorry. We all have bias. And the thing I encourage you to do is to attend and be aware of your biases. 2, establish a vision and team goals. You got to get everybody on the same page. When we have our first track meeting of the year, I have everybody, we have a team rules and policies. It's 18 pages. I'm sure none of them read it, but it's fine. I make them sign it though and turn it back in. They're accountable. Right? And it basically just says stuff like, I'm Coach Dixon. This is my expectations of how you're going to conduct yourself on the track team. Blah, blah, blah. Do this, don't do that. Be friendly to your teammates. Don't be disrespectful. Blah, 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 blah. But I have them sign it and turn it in. You cannot come to practice until I have that signed document on my desk. Right? Trying to establish a vision and what I want for this team. That's part of what the culture is. Seek buy-in. Again, that's why I haven't signed it, right? You signed the document. So guess what happens? When an athlete does something that is against the team rules and policies, where do you think I go first? Oh, hey, did you sign this document that said don't do all these things and you're doing these things? Yeah, now we gotta talk about it. Yeah. Meet and greet each athlete every day. This is something I'm still working on. I told you, we got a lot of different events at track and field. I have a distance coach, I have a sprint hurdle jumps coach, I've had throws coaches. They're all practicing at different times. I'm the head coach. But one of the things I try to do in my team culture is try to talk to every athlete every day. Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. Talk to the distance athletes. Right? I'm not coaching them, but I just want them to know that I'm there. They can come to me. Right? It's a really hard thing to do. It's actually quite time consuming, but it's important. I want them to feel like they're welcome and they belong here and this is home. Develop intercultural competency. That's a whole other thing, right? Basically, cultural competency is your ability to adapt and shift culture. You gotta be able to learn about culture, interculturally, right? Different cultures than your own. You're going to be an inclusive leader, an inclusive track and field coach. You're going to be interacting with different cultures. How are you navigating those experiences? Requires some thought. Drive the culture daily. That's what I feel like my job is every day. I got to drive the culture. That's what I told you about the push-ups. It's a rule. It's hard and fast. Like, nope, you You're late, push-ups. Nope, you're late, push-ups. Every day, all day. And it's not just in a punitive way, right? I drive the culture. I am, we play a lot of different music during our track practices, and don't know if I want to share this, but the other day we had some Taylor Swift on. It wasn't my choice, but we listened to, and then I found out that, I don't know if Taylor Swift is good music when you're doing hurdle mobility. Didn't give us the right vibe, but we played it, right? Because we were trying to be inclusive, right? Some people loved it, some people didn't, but we mix up the music that we play. We play some reggaeton, right? We play some quality trap music, as I call it. We play a little bit of everything, right? Trying to be inclusive as much as we can. Have honest and difficult conversations, right? I know, this is tough. This is a tough one. It is tough sometimes to have those conversations, like if an athlete's late to practice or whatever's going on with their academics or whatever. But have those conversations. Set your expectations and have those conversations and be honest about it, right? The athletes are going to take your lead as far as what you expect from their team. Evaluate and encourage feedback. I told you that we have end of the season evals. And my athletes do not hold back when it's time to evaluate the coaching staff, which sometimes hurts my feelings, but feedback is good, right? We're trying to get better, so I have to take that, all right? Hold people accountable. Back to the push-ups. Hold them accountable for everything they do, all right? My athletes are accountable for how they perform in the classroom, how they perform on the track, what they do in the off season, all of those things. You got to be accountable for that. And last but not least, number 10 that I added this morning, because I was thinking about it. Have fun. Track practice should be fun. When I think back to my days in high school and collegiate track, it was some of the funnest times of my life. Being around these other athletes and competing and going to these meets and just getting out there, my coaches, everything was fun. It was centered around a culture of hard work, but also having fun. All right, that's all I got for you. I will say this, that thank you for being attentive. My contact information is on the board if you need anything or anything I can do for you. I also have cards up here. But thank you for being here, and I wish you all a successful track and field season. And please let me know if there's anything I can help you with. All right?